Now, tensions have been on the rise, as you know, between Turkey and Syria. The Wall Street Journal reporting that Pentagon is pressing Turkey to beef up security on the Syrian border, saying the move would block a 60-mile stretch of the frontier that ISIS exploits to move those fighters in and out of the war zone. Well, the tension between the two countries goes way beyond the shoot-down of that Russian warplane that you see there this week. Turkey's President Recep Erdogan now is expressing regret about what happened, and he says he wants to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin next week at the climate event meeting in Paris. Can that meeting, if it does occur, help the coalition fight against ISIS? Joining us now is Mark Dubowitz. He's executive director of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Mark, first let's talk about that 60-mile border. Why can't it be shut down? I mean, Turkey's got like more than 400,000 troops. They have, 1,000 tanks. And when Kobani was being attacked by ISIS, those tanks sat like they were in the parking lot at Walmart. Why don't they do something?
Eric, it can be shut down. It should be shut down, but the Turkish government has refused to shut it down. And that Turkish border has been a transit point for jihadists, for weapons, for terror financing, and for illegal oil shipments.
Why have they done that? Why have they refused? Is it because of the Kurds?
Well, it's partly because of the Kurds and partly because Erdogan wants to ship men into Syria willing to take down the Assad regime. And he has been quite indiscriminate in deciding where that money and the weaponry goes to. And it's gone to Jabhat al-Nusra, it's gone to ISIS, it's gone to other radical Islamist groups, which is not to say that he has willfully supported them, but he has been, let's say, negligent in the use of that border.
Well, now that he has these calls from the U.S. apparently to try and do something about that border, do you think he will?
Well, it remains to be seen. I mean, he's taken the position that he wants to see the Assad regime go down. I'm sympathetic to that position. But he's also taken the position that he's willing to fan the flames of sectarian warfare in Syria. And along with the Russians and the Iranians, you now have a brutal Syrian civil war. And he's partly to blame for that.
And what about Putin? I mean, Erdogan wants to meet with Putin next week. Apparently called him up in Moscow and talked to a flunky. Putin wouldn't take his call. You think that they will meet next week? Do you think that there can be a rapprochement, so to speak, between them after this warplane was shot down?
Well, certainly things are intensifying. I mean, the Russians have now decided to impose sanctions on Turkey. Russia is Turkey's second largest trading partner and depends on Russia for much of its trade, for its tourism. And so things are ratcheting up. I mean, the pressure is ratcheting up. Hopefully there'll be some kind of rapprochement, because certainly this thing could escalate out of control pretty quickly.
Well, meanwhile, Vladimir Putin told, François Hollande in Moscow the other day that, yeah, he's going to cooperate with the U.S. in targeting ISIS and not targeting the rebels who want to, trying to get Assad. Do you buy that?
I don't buy that.
Do you believe anything that Putin says?
Well, I don't. I mean, I think Putin is going to, he probably will impose some pressure on ISIS. There'll be some strikes, but his goal is to keep Assad in power and is to battle the Syria Free Army, the Free Syria Army, which is actually fighting Assad. I mean, that is Putin's mission, that's the Iranian mission, that's Hezbollah's mission. So
but he's telling everybody, he's going around saying, yes, the quote is, we will cooperate with the U.S. He's telling everybody that. Yeah, Are we getting snookered?
Well, I think it's a Russia disinformation campaign. I mean, I think the Russians have been brilliant at executing that in Ukraine and Georgia and elsewhere. And he's trying to basically use the specter of ISIS and the threats and the post-Paris attack context to try and kind of rally some sympathy and get everybody's eye off the Ukraine ball.
So how long does he play this out? And you talk about Ukraine. Let me read something Marvin Cabaright's got a new book out about Vladimir Putin called Imperial Gamble. This is what he says, quote, asking about Putin. Is he mad or pretending to be mad or just plain cunning, clever, street smart? He improvises, he plays games, he feigns, he prods and he pokes, and when necessary he pauses and maybe retreats. But he does have a strategy and pursues it with an odd mix of rigidity and occasional flexibility. What is his strategy? What will he do?
Well, I think that's exactly right assessment. I think Putin wants to be the major domo of the Middle East. I think he's been pushing aggressively forward. He's been feeling no resistance from the Obama administration. It was interesting, the only leader who was willing to actually push back against Putin was Erdogan of Turkey, who instructed his military to fire on a Russian fighter jet.
Yeah, now he wants to say, I'm sorry.
Well, no, he may be saying sorry, but he's been the only one who's actually been willing to stand up against Putin, which is very interesting. I mean, the administration has shown no willingness to push back against Putin, and Putin has seen an opportunity to move forward in Eastern Europe and move forward in the Middle East, and as I said, become the major domo of both Eastern Europe and the Middle East.
And finally, quickly, what do you think will happen?
Well, I think this thing is going to continue to escalate. I mean, the Syrian civil war is in its death throes, and you've got 250,000, 300,000 dead Syrians, and you've got now every major power fighting for prominence and fighting for influence. I think this thing is going to get worse before it gets better.
All right, Mark Dubowitz, sadly, it'll get worse. I mean, it is almost seemingly can't get worse. 11 million people displaced, so many dead, a human catastrophe that continues. Thank you for joining.